Hi guys, today we're going to be examining perspective in writing. Perspective aligns with point of view in that we can look at first person, third person, and so on, but we also have to consider differing perspectives and who's providing those perspectives or points of view. So this first cartoon I have is just showing how we have the same situation. The situation in this cartoon is rain. However, there are three different perspectives on what's happening as a result of the rain. The reporter is upset, of course, because the rain is going to damage her equipment. The panda is happy because the rain's going to help his plants grow. And the bride is disappointed. She thinks her wedding is ruined because of the rain. So we're looking at the exact same situation, but three different perspectives. Another way to look at that is this cartoon, which shows us, again, same situation, different responses, different information based on who is sharing that information. So here we have the person who's stuck on the island, who's overjoyed to see a boat, and the person who's stuck on a boat, really excited to see land. So same situation, they're both alone, but they have a differing perspective. The texts we're going to look at today are about Hiroshima, the bombing of Hiroshima, to be specific. The first one is an excerpt from a personal experience, and then the second one is an excerpt that's a little bit more of like a scientific perspective. The reason to examine the different perspectives is to figure out when we're getting ready to write our speeches, our persuasive pieces, what's going to be the best perspective to take? Or do we need to examine many perspectives to get our readers' attention, to get our point across? So we're going to examine two texts about the same event, but they're from different perspectives. And I'd like for you to consider, first of all, what you learn from them, and secondly, which perspective gets the point across better, and how can you apply this to your writing? You have this text in front of you. You can also follow along on the screen. Hiroshima excerpts for examining perspective. Excerpt 1 from Hiroshima by John Hersey. At nearly midnight, the night before the bomb was dropped, an announcer on the city's radio station said that about 200 B-29s were approaching the southern Honshu and advised the population of Hiroshima to evacuate to their designated safe areas. Mrs. Hatsuyo Nakamura, the tailor's widow, who lived in the section called Nobori-cho and who had long had a habit of doing as she was told, got her three children, a 10-year-old boy, Toshio, an 8-year-old girl, Yeiko, and a 5-year-old girl, Maiko, out of bed and dressed them and walked with them to the military area known as the East Parade Ground on the northeast edge of the city. There she unrolled some mats and the children lay down on them. They slept until about 2 when they were awakened by the roar of the planes going over Hiroshima. As soon as the planes had passed, Mrs. Nakamura started back with her children. They reached home a little after 2:30, and she immediately turned on the radio, which, to her distress, was just then broadcasting a fresh warning. When she looked at the children and saw how tired they were, and when she thought of the number of trips they had made in past weeks, all to no purpose, to the East Parade Ground, she decided that in spite of the instructions on the radio, she simply could not face starting out all over again. She put the children in their bedrolls on the floor, lay down herself at 3 o'clock, and fell asleep at once, so soundly that when planes passed over later, she did not waken to their sound. The siren jarred her awake at about 7. She arose, dressed quickly, and hurried to the house of Mr. Nakamoto, the head of her neighborhood association, and asked him what she should do. He said that she should remain at home unless an urgent warning a series of intermittent blasts of the siren was sounded. She returned home, lit the stove in the kitchen, set some rice to cook, and sat down to read that morning's Hiroshima Chugoku. To her relief, the all clear sounded at 8 o'clock. She heard the children stirring, so she went and gave each of them a handful of peanuts and told them to stay in their bedrolls because they were tired from the night's walk. She had hoped that they would go back to sleep, but the man in the house directly to the south began to make a terrible hullabaloo of hammering, wedging, ripping, and splitting. The prefectural government, one convinced, as everyone in Hiroshima was, that the city would be attacked soon, and had begun to press with threats and warnings for the completion of wide fire lanes, which it was hoped might act in conjunction with the rivers to localize any fires starting by an incendiary raid, and the neighbor was reluctantly sacrificing his home to the city's safety. Just the day before, the prefecture had ordered all able-bodied girls from the secondary schools to spend a few days helping to clear these lanes, and they started to work soon after the all clear sounded. Okay, I have to delete these numbers. They showed up by accident, so ignore those. So the first excerpt is the account of an individual and her experience with the events leading up to the bombing. Think about that. There's a quiz on Canvas that's going to ask you what you learned. You can start that now, or you can wait till we've read the second excerpt. Excerpt number 2 is from the Avalon Project at Yale Law School. You'll find the perspective of this text to be more informational, not necessarily an individual's perspective, but it gives valuable information no less. The center of the city contained a number of reinforced concrete buildings, as well as lighter structures. Outside the center, the area was congested by a dense collection of small wooden workshops set among Japanese houses. A few larger industrial plants lay near the outskirts of the city. The houses were of wooden construction with tile roofs. Many of the industrial buildings also were of wood frame construction. The city as a whole was highly susceptible to fire damage. Some of the reinforced concrete buildings were of a far stronger construction than is required by normal standards in America, because of the earthquake danger in Japan. This exceptionally strong construction undoubtedly accounted for the fact that the framework of some of the buildings, which were fairly close to the center of damage in the city, did not collapse. The population of Hiroshima had reached a peak of over 380,000 earlier in the war, but prior to the atomic bombing, the population had steadily decreased because of a systematic evacuation ordered by the Japanese government. At the time of the attack, the population was approximately 255,000. This figure is based on the registered population used by the Japanese in computing ration quantities, and the estimates of additional workers and troops who were brought into the city may not be highly accurate. Hiroshima thus had approximately the same number of people as the city of Providence, Rhode Island, or Dallas, Texas. The next thing I'd like for you to do is go on to Canvas . Find our class. You're going to open up quizzes. Remember, quizzes are classwork grades. They're just a little bit more streamlined for grading. And it's called Perspectives on Hiroshima. When you open that up, you're going to be asked for 3 questions. There are opportunities for redos, so please do your best if you don't want to do a redo. The first question is about the first excerpt. And you're being asked what you learned about the bombing. So the first excerpt is leading up to the bombing. It doesn't have the actual bombing in it. But what did you learn about the events in Hiroshima at that time from this perspective? And again, same sort of question, but from the next text. What did you learn? Same event, you're going to learn different things because the perspectives are different. And finally, you're going to be asked to evaluate the perspective. Which one does a better job of getting the point across of what it was like in Hiroshima leading up to the bombing? Why does that particular text do a better job? The third one is your opinion, but you have to explain your thinking. Good luck.